what wattage should I use in my Ackie enclosures? How often do I feed my Ackie, and how much do I feed per feeding? Third biggest question I get is enclosure size. This is just going to be focused on the most urgent asked questions. Hey guys, how's it going? Today I thought I would do a video on my most asked Ackie Monitor questions. I get a lot of these, so if I could kind of make one video talking about my most asked questions, I could just point you guys to this video. It is going to touch a lot on the care guides I do for my Ackie, specifically the last one, the most up-to-date one. But this is just going to be focused on the most urgent asked questions. So let's get to it. Couple announcements first. Special thanks to Herp M and David T for supporting the Patreon. If you're interested in some cool behind the scenes stuff, check out the top right corner. Make sure to check out the merch as well. I'm wearing my Salads for Chump shirt today. That will be in the top right as well. 4 different designs. You can get it on a phone case, you can get it on a mug, you can get it on a shirt, whatever. Make sure to check it out. Lastly, check out the Herp Hour on Twitch, where me and Dakota from DBCB Exotics do a weekly podcast with a special guest. We have Homegrown Scales coming up tomorrow on Saturday, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. GMT, and we just did one with Neptune the Chameleon. That will be in the description below. The top question I get is, what wattage should I use in my Ackie enclosures? We're going to be briefly talking about the adults, and then I'll mention babies or juveniles. Right now, I have 80 watt halogen floodlights in here. And if you want to peek up, Olivia, these are the exact brand I get. I always usually get a 6-pack. They're 90 to 120 watt replacements made by GE. So I have these in all my adults right now, but in the summertime, the ambient temperature inside this room gets much higher. So I usually droop those down to, I don't know, I think it's the 60 watts. It's this one right here. Yeah, 60 watt, 75 watt replacement. So it's not always the same, and that's why it's hard for me to give you guys advice on what wattage to use, because it really depends on your room's ambient temperature, and it depends on the seasons in my case. So right now we're coming out of winter, we're in spring, we're going to the summer, the ambient temperature is rising in here, so these are probably going to go soon. When both of these run out, I'll probably replace them with the 60 watts. So my advice is to just try the medium one, which is the 60 watt. Put probably 2 of them because you want a wider gradient. And then if it's too hot, you can drop down to a 38 watt halogen floodlight. And if it's too low, you can go up to the 80 watt, which are the ones in there. That's the best way in my mind to approach it. Wow, Dell really went for that one. That's the best way in my mind to approach it. I think that's how you can go with the middle ground and see if you need higher or lower. I just always have an assortment of different ranges of halogen floodlights in terms of wattage. And that's how, you know, if I need something a little bit lower, I go and grab one of the lower ones. I don't think it's bad to stock up and make sure you have a little extra and have a diverse range, because you never know what you're going to need. So that's the best way I could kind of go at it in my mind. And to focus on having 2 bulbs in here instead of 1, what that allows is not only for the wider gradient, but it also allows for you to mess with the temperatures a lot more and be a lot more precise. You don't have to just have 1 bulb in there. I could replace one of these with a 60 watt and also keep an 80 watt in here. I could replace both of them. So that way you can have different wattages and different sockets, and that way you could really precisely change the temperature in this area and the temperature gradient. So I definitely advocate for having 2 bulbs in your enclosures, and if you have a properly sized enclosure, that should not be a problem. Over here in the baby Ackie enclosure, I have 2 60 watts in there currently, and that's getting it to a little over 140, which is a little high. The reasoning it's a little high is because I just replaced that bulb on the right with a brand new 60 watt, and that's something important to take note of, is that replacing a bulb, you're going to see a drastic sort of increase in basking temp because the new bulb is going to be much hotter. So you gotta keep that in mind. What I did is I just pulled the cords up a little bit instead of keeping them drooped down to around here. So that should take away that extra heat. But that also advocates for having a wide range of wattages available, because if you put in a new bulb and it's much hotter, you might want to take out the other bulb and put in a lower wattage or something. There's a lot of reasons why you'd want a wide range of wattages, but I just wanted to show off what I have going for the baby enclosure right now. And you also got to make sure, depending on what month and age your baby Ackie is, what that wattage is going to equate to in terms of temperature. You don't want it too hot when they're very young, below 6 months. Probably like 130 max, and then you want to ramp it up slowly to their adult temperature as they get close to a year. The second question I see a lot of is how often do I feed my Ackie and how much do I feed per feeding? And that's hard to really answer. You really got to observe your Ackie and see what their weight looks like after a certain amount of feeding, and then base your next feeding off of that. And you got to really look at trends, because you're not going to see, an increase or decrease in size immediately after one feeding. It's going to be over time, but you need to respond to that. But I do get that question in terms of what should I start out with, so I kind of want to give some guidelines for that. I think a good guideline for an adult Ackie in terms of starting out with is about like 5 1-inch to 1.25-inch size roaches if you're doing dubia roaches, or about 5 to 8 large crickets. Something in that range is probably something good to start out with in terms of size and the amount you should give per feeding. I feed 3 times a week for my adults, and that range is from about 1.5 years to 2 years in age, and I've been doing that pretty much since they've been a little over a year in age. So that's what I do. I think that's a good place to start out with, but you got to make sure you're going to start out that you base, what you do in the future off of how they respond to that. If they start putting on too much weight, then start reducing the amount you give them or the size you give them. But that's what I would generally give advice-wise for how much you should give and how frequently you should give in terms of food for these guys as adults. Now, of course, baby Ackies are a little different, and they'll be even different between the different months in age they are as babies. 4-month-year-old babies, under 6-month-year-old babies, you're going to want to give like 1/4 of an inch size dubia roaches. You probably can give them large size crickets because they're really good at eating large prey. But for the dubias, I would be a little bit smaller. And I think a good place to start out with, if they're below 6 months, is about maybe 4 of them. That's what I did, and I thought that was good. And of course, you want to change and adapt based off of what you see when you start offering that. Reduce if they look like they're getting chunky, whatever. You can see a lot more of how they react to that amount of food items and how big the food items is, because they put on weight and drop weight a lot more than when they're adults. So you'll see that trend much more apparent than you would with an adult. Now, the biggest difference from baby Ackie to adult Ackie is the frequencies. When they're babies, especially very young, you want to feed them every day. I start to reduce days or miss days. Once I get over 6 months, once I get towards 8 months, I start thinking about every other day, and then I do the 3 times a week feeding when they hit adulthood. That's the major difference. Now, I do want to show off the size difference between dubia roaches from baby to adult. This is what I'm offering my adult Ackies right now and my baby 7-month-year-old Ackies. So these are the size differences. The left is obviously the adult. This is probably a little over an inch right here. And then on my right hand is what I would offer the babies. This is probably 1/2 inch in terms of size. Don't want them to fall on the ground because Olivia's going to crack up like she just did in an outtake. But what I have is a 2 different size right here, so you can see how apparent that is. I just wanted to give a visual on that, since I know you guys probably aren't just going to go and measure your roaches. So that's what I got in terms of size. Now, this is a little bit bigger than what I would give a sub 6-month-year-old. Just a little bit, not too much bigger. But what I do is, as I get aged higher towards 8 months, instead of increasing the amount of roaches I give, I just increase the size. So I still offer probably around 4, maybe 5 per Ackie in there. I just increase the size of the dubia roach a little bit more until around 8 months, and that's when it starts changing completely. Third biggest question I get is enclosure size. I'm a big advocate for giving properly spaced out enclosures for my Ackies with plenty of climbing. A lot of people will say they can be okay in a 4x2 by 2 foot enclosure. They cannot be. There's nothing that has convinced me yet that they can be. The smallest enclosure I have, and this is for babies under 8 months, is this 4x2 by 3 foot enclosure. And the vertical space is probably the most important and the biggest reason why a 4x2 by 2 cannot work. Ackies, despite being a dwarf monitor, are some of the most active reptiles I've seen. They will use all their space that you give them. I wish I could give them more than the adult size enclosures that are already 6 by 2.5 by 4 feet. So they will use it, and you want them to use it. You want them to be active. Don't confine them in a little enclosure. Like I said, they need a lot of dirt to burrow in, especially females, so they don't retain their eggs. There's a lot of reasons. I did a video on this topic about why Ackie Monitor standard enclosures are too small. Check the top right for that video. The advantage of doing these videos is that I get to give you guys information in one place, and we can save time for the both of us. Obviously, if you have follow-up questions, I am always happy to answer any question, especially follow-up questions. But I wanted to do this video so I could just give you guys a video to these questions when you ask me, especially as this channel gets more traction. It might be harder to respond to you all, but I'm going to try my best to keep that up. But just in case, I'm going to have videos like these. And if you guys enjoyed this one, I could definitely do a part 2. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to check out the Patreon, the merch, the Herp Hour on Twitch, all in the description. See you guys.